So it is recording. So I'm very pleased to present to you Eloy Fisher. He has a brilliant mind. He has a PhD in economics. He also studied political science at the New School. And of course, as he mentioned earlier, the graduation was in Panama City. He works in the Ministry of Ministério da Fazenda in Panama.
Farm Minister.
So he deals with. I imagine that I can say this from the topic that you're presenting. That Eloy Fisher is very interested in the connections between philosophy, politics, and economics, with of course with ethical implications. But so it's I'm quite anxious to hear a presentation. It will be the talk will be on the Prometheus Secret, the Dark and Impossible Enlightenment. So thank you very much, Eloy, for being here, for accepting the invitation. It's really a pleasure, and I hope this can be the first of many future collaborations.
Well, thank you, Marta. Like, I for many years have been I've been away from the flock of academia, because I've been working here at the Ministry of in Panama. It's in Brazil. I know that you have the Ministry of Planning and the Treasury.
The Treasury.
We have like a combined ministry, and the thing is, I've been working for the past like 7 or 8 years in this stuff. And the thing is that I'm getting back to academia, and I still work in economics, generally from a classical liberal point of view. And even though I also work within the Marxist and Keynesian traditions. My PhD advisor was Duncan Foley, which I love the guy. And he's brilliant. Like the most brilliant person ever. Like it's crazy how smart he is. But the thing is that like Duncan always, and then I'll do the segue into the new school and the talk. I don't have any PowerPoints, so don't expect it. So I'm just gonna be talking. The thing about Duncan,
too fast.
What? I talk too fast. I will talk slower. Sorry.
Please.
The thing about Duncan is that Duncan works in different traditions. And one of the things that we got exposed at the New School, especially through Duncan, was how to apply thinking, like even from different traditions, like from Marxist, Keynesian, and the liberal, the classical liberal. It was not very much taught at the New School, but even those concepts, to apply them to other endeavors. And what I tried to do in this paper was trying to talk about trying to talk about phone is always.
Don't get upset.
Trying to talk about one topic in particular that is being very relevant to today's world, and I've come to know about it through the exposure that we have here at the ministry, in terms of the new regulations that have to do with fintech and the development of financial technologies in general. And how this view of technology as a solution to all our problems stems from a misunderstanding of what is the Enlightenment, especially if you understand what was Kant trying to do when he wrote his famous essay. And this is an underlying theme. If you read about the economics news media, if you read about many of the theories that are now being talked about business theory, there is an underlying theme about the rejection of Enlightenment values. And this is what I term in the paper Prometheus Secret. The thing is that in ancient Greek mythology, you all know the story about Prometheus, right? He was the guy that gave fire to humanity to advance progress, right? And the thing is that slighted by Prometheus, Jupiter chained Prometheus to a rock, and he had a vulture eat at his liver until the end of time.
I think it was Prometheus.
Prometheus, yes. And the thing is that what I try to do is like it's a change in the story, which is that the secret of Prometheus, like awarding fire to humanity, it was not something about like giving fire to advance progress. That it was more of a trick. The trick was that the secret of technology, that fire was never the reward. What was the reward in terms of the secret of Prometheus was the resistance to obey authority, and in order for humanity to progress. And that was what the basic point of Kant's essay, which was the use of the free and public use of reason, and resist authority as a way of getting knowledge, is precisely the thing that we are forgetting in this day and age, especially now that we see technology and the promise of technology as something that is going to solve all our problems. And with that introduction, I will talk a little bit about Kant and Locke, and what was their point of view in terms of what was the project, the original Enlightenment project, for just to review that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, I don't know if you've heard about Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is one of the earliest investors in PayPal, and it was known to be one of earliest of Elon Musk's early business partners. And Peter Thiel is classically trained. Like he went to Stanford Law School, and he trained under René Girard. And he has a brilliant essay, and it's called The Straussian Moment, where he demolishes pretty much what is the understanding of the Enlightenment that we have seen, that is present in Kant and especially in Locke, and how that and how his destruction of that ideal stems to like a current underlying way of thinking in terms of business, that you even see it in mainstream thought. There is a book called Great Founder Theory by Samo Borja. And Great Founder Theory pretty much wants to do to business, trying to create a view of history, that history is not a view of social processes or movements, but is about great men. It's trying to revive the point of view that history is just the collection of heroic moments of great men in history, and that pretty much is serving that as a buttress, as a foundation for many of the things that we are seeing today in all the news about all these guys that are flying like rockets to the moon, because there is a conception of history that was present in Thomas Carlyle, and it was present in Schumpeter, about what is the driving force of progress, right? And the driving force of progress, in that point of view, is not a resistance to authority or the free public use of reason. Is the view of great men doing great things. but it's very it's what and Peter Thiel is brilliant because he's very Straussian about it. He basically the Straussian moment is he invokes Strauss by trying to hide the underlying point of view in what he wants to present. And then I'll end with the fact that perhaps there is this view of the Dark Enlightenment, which is regressing to a you could argue to a feudal way of understanding the world. But perhaps this oscillation between what Kant tried to propose in his essay and this darker view of the Enlightenment stems from the fact that there is something inherently wrong with the Enlightenment project. And I'll end there. So I'll start, and I'll start the presentation. Well, the first things first. The whole point of Kant, like in his essay about what is Enlightenment, was trying to say, you know what, we are living today in his day and age. It was 1784, if I'm not mistaken. He was saying, you know what, we are living today at the doors of a new beginning, and we need to grow as humanity beyond the confines of our self-imposed immaturity. That's what he said in the essay. And he said that we need to dare to know, sapere aude, right? We need to dare to know, and we need to use the free and public use of reason in order to understand the world. But one of the things that people forget is that when Kant was writing this essay, his material circumstances were very much the same than 300 years ago when he was writing that essay. So the world did not change a lot between the 1400s and the 1700s, because the world as a whole was growing at a 0.5%. So that basically means that things like economic growth was doubling every 150 years. So people used to sleep on the same bed, like two generations used to use the same bed. They used the same plows, they used the same utensils in order for them. They lived in the same houses. The same house housed literally 3 or 4 generations of the same people, right? But when Kant was writing this, the world was achieving 1% growth. So that means that material circumstances were changing every 70 years. And Engels, which was a very sophisticated observer, he said that the England at 60 years after Kant wrote that essay, England was completely different from the England that he had known before. And what does this mean for with the whole thing about enlightenment? The thing is that enlightened views about the world were present when Leonardo Bruni and Dante and Petrarch were talking about the Renaissance. But the thing is that those ideas did not get a hold of material circumstances because the world was not growing at the same rate that their ideas. The ideas didn't reflect themselves materially. When Kant wrote this, the ideas reflected themselves materially in the world that he was living in. So the daring to know was actually something that had like real consequences. And Engels talked about those real consequences 60 years later, when the steam engine was invented. The French Revolution happened like 10 years after that. Cities started growing at a faster clip. And even then, the dare to know, the free and public use of reason was exemplified in the democratic processes that stemmed out of the initial of the French Revolution. You could argue that the French Revolution was it was a crazy event in human history, but it gave us the first example of how the first practical example of the public use of reason applied to government affairs. Now, the problem was that free and public use of reason depended on something that that it's not very well. It's an assumption that is not very well flushed out in Kant's Enlightenment essay, which was Locke's concept of reasonableness. Because in order for you to use the free and public use of reason, that reason, like I don't know how to say that in English. That reason has to be I don't want to be redundant. It has to be reasonable, and in order for it to be reasonable, it has to come at the margin, as you need to weight that reason at the margin. It has to be indifferent to other choices. And let's put it this way: in order for you to use reason, you need to weight equal choices in order for you to dare to know, right? You cannot base yourself in authority to discard choices that you deem unreasonable. Let's put it this way, and that is something that happened during the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, many of the codes that were known to be taboo during the feudal age, right? Those codes were they were brought into the game, into the fold, and treated equally as alternative political choices that were not even that would have not been even dared to be thought about in the feudal age. And let's put it this way: like during history, many kings have been beheaded, right? But the fact that you had during the Thermidor, you actually had a king, like most of the nobility, like a large chunk of the nobility, was beheaded and was subject to trial, public trial, was something that like in past ages would have been deemed unreasonable, right? It was brought into the fold as the set of choices expanded, right? But the fact in order for you to have a reasonable choice means that at the margin, you need to be indifferent to the choices that are within your choice set, right? And the thing is that Locke, in order for you to be a reasonable person, you need to be able to challenge authority, but at the same time, as you challenge authority, you need to be able to expand your choice sets of alternatives to the point that each choice set of alternatives at the margin is indifferent to the next, right? And the thing is that gives you today a view that the intensity of preferences that we have today is just so varied, but that we don't have, the choices that we have is so varied that we don't have the intensity of preferences that we might, given the fact that we are not constrained, right? And I'll put an example there that pretty much that Theo brings in his essay. Theo talks about the fact that in today's world we have opinions that at the margin we are indifferent whether we choose to be in terms of like, let's put it this way, in terms of like our desire to be entertained. We have a lot of opinions, but we don't know we can actually be able to exchange those opinions in terms of our choice sets. We don't know the criteria of how to choose those opinions, and that becomes the problem with being reasonable, that we don't have that heroic view of being able to have an opinion, because if we do so, then we will be seen as a fanatic, right? So Theo, when he talks about the fact that the Enlightenment, when he talks about the free public use of reason, and the fact that we have a choice set of opinions that at the margin is reasonable, but at the end becomes indifferent, we lack a view of being able to be heroic in terms of our views, right? And he actually talks about in his essay, The Astrology Moment, about September 11, right? He talks about why is it, and he brings it up as a provocation. Why is it that people are flocking at that time? There were fighters flocking to fight in Afghanistan, right? From Europe and from the United States, very much like Benjamin Franklin used to complain during the Revolution, during the early days of the American Republic, that there were people that were living in Boston and that were living in Philadelphia that were flocking to live with the American indigenous populations, and why was that not the other way around? There was something heroic in this views of trying to see the world in good versus evil, in contrast to trying to view the world in terms of a reasonable in different choices. And the fact is that it adds insult to injury that 20 years later it was the Taliban that actually were able to overpower the United States in Afghanistan 20 years after that essay was written. So he's arguing towards a devolution to that sort of intensity of preferences that Locke was trying to talk down when he wrote his two books about this issue, about Untoleration and the Reasonable of Christianity. That he argued that zealots were not because they were trying to corner the truth that was taking away the reasonableness of a belief that was so conducive to understanding as Christianity. But he tries to water down version of Christianity. And what does this mean to the current moment? The thing is that as Thiel tries to put a hole in what it means to be reasonable from a Kantian point of view, it basically means that, you know what, hey, the point, what the world, like the human nature, is not about being reasonable and indifferent to many choices. The fact that we are talking about Locke today, and how his view of reasonableness dilutes our desire for understanding, according to Thiel, is the fact that we need to go back and talk about what is the firmer element of human nature, which is that view that we need to have intense preferences that are not about the free and public use of reason, but they stem more from not even the private use of reason, which also Kant talks about in What is the Enlightenment, in terms of what bureaucracies do in terms of government. No, he's talking about how can we emulate the consequences of reason to achieve material well-being, the material levels of well-being that daring to know actually allows us to have. And let's put an example in terms of what is right now happening in terms of our current condition in terms of economics, right? We are seeing that nowadays the use of technology is trying to mimic the free and public use of reason, not by having like well-reasoned debates, but it's by hijacking the emotions that are within that are being expressed publicly. And you could argue you can argue that they're expressed publicly in social media and all these things, but they're even expressed publicly in debates hijacking the emotions that are, according to Thiel, the true condition and the firmer elements of human nature. And we need to resist authority. That was the project of Enlightenment, but not through the public and use of reason, but through the use of technology that hijacks emotions to push against reason. So it's, and you see that every day, right? All current technologies of communication say that they want to make you freer, right? But what they want to use is to hijack your emotions, right? In order for your emotions to be the driver of your pursuit against, quote unquote, what it's deemed to be authority, right? So you have those two, you have the bright enlightenment, and that's the point of the bright enlightenment, right? The free and public use of reason that are the margin, it requires, the margin becomes reasonable choices. As the choice sets expand, then they become indifferent. And then you have the dark enlightenment, which is that the use of technological means to achieve the semblance of reason, of reason, but it's not reason, but it's hijacking emotion to push back against authority to achieve, so quote unquote, the same results. But the point of the dark enlightenment is there's a current. I don't want to say that it's all bad, but there's something sinister about the view, because the free and public use of reason always had an underlying democratic element behind it, right? That history was the view of social movements and social processes that you could even say all mass movements, whether from the right or the left, could agree that it was the free and public use of reason that actually drove history, right? But the dark enlightenment is pretty much trying to get us back a little bit to the feudal ages, because they're saying, you know what, like, in order for us to, we want to deal against authority, because again, the dark enlightenment, the authority they want to go against is the authority that is democratic in nature, right? That is the current authority nowadays. So for them, there is an enlightenment project, but it's not an enlightenment project that is democratic in nature. For them, they want to go back to an earlier view of how to deal with that, how to tackle that authority. And the thing that you see this in pre-enlightened thought, right? You could actually argue that the dark enlightenment stems from a lot from the work of Joseph de Maistre, and currently you could argue that there is a classical liberal thinker, Horace Simon Hoppe, that basically said that, and this is an underlying theme for many of the things of the dark enlightenment, that he says that democracy, in order for democracy to work, you need to have high discount rates. That basically means you need to discount the current consumption more than future consumption more than current consumption. That basically means that you want things now, and you cannot wait for the future. And he argues that feudalism, given the fact it was more decentralized, it had a longer horizon, you could argue you could wait things out in order for progress to happen. It's a funny way of thinking, because the thing is that at that time there was no such thing as economic growth, right? But the things that you start thinking about these views of relative economic growth, you start thinking, why are many of the people that are involved in the tech sector so interested into like achieving high rates of growth, right? And why do they? And why there's a lot of talk about current technological stagnation relative to the views of sci-fi that happened 50 years ago. Peter Thiel when asked about this, he said very pithily, like I think it was like 5 years ago, that we were promised flying cars and we only got 140 characters, right? But he's very interested, like, you know what, we were promised like all this sci-fi stuff, that we're gonna go to the moon and do all these things. And we're just like, right now, our current breakthrough technology is living in the metaverse. So, but why is that like concern? Why is that a concern? And pretty much is a concern is because the way that, the reason why many of these thinkers, what they want is to be able to coalesce around of a more agile, non-democratic structure that allows for fast decision making and for higher rates of growth. That's the reason why many people within this view of the Dark Enlightenment, they see with interesting views what is happening today in China, for instance, right? And you could argue that there's a kernel of what the Chinese, like the Communist Party is like, it's inherited from original Enlightenment ideals. But the thing is that you could argue that there is, and that's something that I will leave in brackets. But the thing is that many of the people that are involved in this space, that are talking about great founders being the drivers of history, about trying to find ways to get people away from government regulations and into space and do their own thing, they see these views of unlimited growth and current stagnation and they see this as the result of us getting of the Bright Enlightenment project of being spent. That the Enlightenment pretty much promised and under-delivered. But the funny thing is, and this actually is, there is a thinker named Curtis Jarvin that he has a blog post called he has a Substack called the Gray Mirror, and it's funny why he termed the Substack Gray Mirror, because in the feudal ages, the mirrors were books that taught princes how to act, right? And there was a lot of books about like teaching like the prince how to conduct himself and how to make decisions. But then Machiavelli came and he said, you know what, these books are rubbish. Like, I am going to tell you how the world works, right? And he made the prince. But Jarvin says, like, you know what, like, we need to take a little bit of Machiavelli and we need to do the prince and the mirrors of princes, because what we want, like and Jarvin is a guy that actually worked in tech for many years, but he's very smart. He's a troglodyte. Like he pretty much wants to go back to like the 1100s. He says, you know what, like this is how the world works, but we need to go back to a point of view, to a view where we need a CEO type leader that is able to keep people at bay, right? And to be able to talk populism, but enact monarchic ideals, right? And that's the reason why, and there is a, and this actually goes throughout the spectrum. Like there was also like a writing about Dominic Cummings, which was the advisor to Boris Johnson, that he was arguing about how to raise a project for Silicon Valley entrepreneurs to have a so-called startup model of government reform, because he said, you know what, like you really cannot change government. What you need is to have like some sort of startup within the government structure that is able to pretty much rise above the law and do whatever needs to be done, and then just just rule. But the thing is that these ideas are not new. That pretty much what Dominic Cummings is trying to do with Silicon Valley jargon is pretty much do what Schmidt was talking about, like what is power in terms of the power resides in the guy that makes the exception, the states that declares the exception. So that startup was pretty much the exception. And that sort of thinking is pervading both the left and the right. So it's not a matter of like the Enlightenment being the project being spent. It's the fact that the language of this sort of language about hijacking emotion, technology hijacking emotion to achieve results that were that are amicable or similar to those analogous to the free public and use of reason, right? That's one, and trying to use that sort of trying to use might as rights through technological means, trying to simulate that. That sort of language and rhetoric is pervading both the platforms of the left and the right. Like there's nothing people don't talk about in this day and age of polarization. They don't talk about trying to get people in agreement or having discussions or that actually stem from reasonableness, because many people say that if you are a reasonable person today, you are not effective. That is the point that Peter Thiel tries to do when he tries to talk about how reasonableness is just a spent force, right? But the things that trying to contrast both the dark and the bright enlightenment, the conclusion might be that it's not that we need to go back to the bright enlightenment, because there is something. Thiel has a point. If you are reasonable to the point that you are indifferent to choices, then you become like Buridan's ass, that you're stuck in the middle, right? And you have 2 barrels of hay, and you pretty much starve to death because you don't know where, you're indifferent to both choices, right? And you stay there and you just don't act, right? But there's also, but going back to the Dark Enlightenment is not, there's something sinister beneath the veneer of that used to hijack emotion in order to achieve results of the free and public use of reason. So perhaps there is something wrong with the whole point, the whole concept of enlightenment itself, right? Because, and I'll end here, over the next 5 minutes, so we can open the discussion. I think that the Enlightenment actually talks about 3 basic choices, right? The first choice is the discount, the discount rates, like the fact that in order for progress to happen, if you actually have higher rates of economic growth, right, and because of innovation and all that, the fact is that the world changes so fast that it's very hard for you to know where you came from and see the people that are from the future as similar to you, the way that Engels was talking about, right? Because Kant could see that Leonardo Bruni in the Renaissance, they were similar because there was no growth, because the discount rates were, the growth was non-existent, but they were able to see themselves as part of the same tradition, right? But if you have high rates of economic growth, like your future self, right, is very different from your current self, right? You need to have low discount rates in order for you to be able to see yourself in your future self. So you don't discount the future as much, and you can actually see your future self and your children and grandchildren as being having the same rights and responsibilities because you see them as human. People that are involved in the whole singularity movement, they pretty much say that they want the world to be the future self is going to be unrecognizable from you. And then you start talking about, well, are those people in the future are going to be human? Are they going to care like what happens to other humans, right? Are they going to be caring about human rights if you're in the singularity, right? So that's a point. That's the first point about the discount rates. You need to have like a competitive system of checks in order for you to put to contest what works and what doesn't work. You need to put it to competition, right? You need to be able to say, like, you know what, this explanation actually works, this explanation doesn't work, and you need to make them fight them out in order for them to find actually what's right. And the only way that you can actually do that is through some competitive process that you are able to, for those ideas and for the ideas to duke it out, right? And the third point is the fact that you are able to, you need to have some sort of like social scalability mechanism. In order for you to convince other people, you need to have checks and balances that come as a result of governance structures, right? But the point is that you can have two of these things, but you cannot have the three of them. You really cannot have low discount rates. You cannot have competitive checks for preferences, and you cannot have social balances for the scalability of human organizations, because if you actually that's an impossible trilemma. Like the reason why you can have the three of them is if you have low discount rates that actually permit you to see your future selves, future humans, very much like the same humans as you see them today. You cannot have those things if you have a competitive process that challenges ideas, because those ideas are going to raise discount rates, and they're going to increase economic growth. And that's the reason why you're not going to be able to see your future very similar to your current your current views. And the thing is that, and the same happens between competitive checks and social scalability mechanisms. You cannot have these three things for the Enlightenment to succeed. And perhaps the point about the Enlightenment is not that you need to achieve these three things, is that you need, it's like pretty much like the three-body problem, that these things are going to be in constant flux, but the process itself of resisting authority, whatever that authority is what is important. And that's inverting the Enlightenment equation. And I'll end here, because it was Foucault that in his rejoinder to the Enlightenment, he tried to sneak about, like, hey, like this point about power, right? Like I forget his phrase precisely, but he says something like very cheekily, like, well, if we start talking about how we acquire power, then this whole point of the Enlightenment becomes moot. And then you start talking about the issues of intersectionality and how is that power awarded. But my concern is a little bit, it's inverted. Is perhaps the Enlightenment, and I'll end here, when Kant wrote it, it was not about the free and public use of reason, right? It's about the challenge to authority, whatever that authority was, right? And Kant's proposal was that in order to challenge authority, it was about the use of the free and public use of reason. But that is one alternative, right? The point of the Enlightenment is never to take anything as granted, right? And and you could argue that it's a little counterintuitive. It sounds a little Marxist, because it is, because it's trying to resist the temptation to have the last answer. And that is something, and not here, that is something that the only person that actually talks about that is David Deutsch in the beginning of Infinity. If you read all the Pinker books about the Enlightenment, he feels that he has the answer, right? And there's like, okay, this is the answer. You really cannot go against this. But that is not the point. The point is not that the Enlightenment has all the answers, because there's a lot of people that are like going against like science and all those things, the conspiracy theories. Like that is, you could argue that there is a misdirected view of what means to challenge authority, right? But it stems from, I think, what is the perennial condition of humankind, which is pretty much challenging their authority through different means. And the constructive way to do so is generally to just, you know what? Challenge authority, but rejoice in the process, not in the answer. And I'll end it there. I know you have a lot of questions. Hopefully that was clear. This is a work in progress. And I said to Marta, I plan to be working on this over the next couple of years, like through some articles and stuff that I'm writing. But this is the first one, so bear with me a little bit. Thank you, Marta. I hope this was the first of so many other seminars that I can be able to share with you and your colleagues.
Wonderful, Eloy Fisher. Wonderful. Well, I certainly have questions, but I know that Wanderson is a little bit anxious. He wrote a couple of questions in the chat. His first question is exactly to think this dynamics between the public use of reason and the reasonable community and vice versa, right? So in order to make the public use of reason, we need a reasonable community, but also you can only get to the point of becoming a reasonable community if we already if we develop these means of this public use of reason, right? So Wanderson made a reflection on that, and then he asked about the origins of enlightenment in Locke. Of course, Locke that argues for a natural freedom and this very liberal but also libertarian sense of freedom, in a sense of being the owner of myself, being the owner of myself, and this connection, and of course freedom as a natural right that is absolutely opposed to even the possibility of slavery. So Wanderson, would you like to ask a specific question on this that you wrote?
No, teacher. The only questions I had are already in the chat.
Okay.
I don't have any other question.
Okay.
So, bye now.
So I think I may take a little bit of Wanderson's input and start with the reflection, and then I'll let Ricardo speak as well, which is it seems, especially today, it seems that we are caught, like the project of a positive enlightenment didn't work. We know that for the reasons that you just mentioned, but there's some there's a great discomfort in accepting or resigning to the alternative of the Dark Enlightenment, because there's something, and here I think that it has to do also with that relationship between emotions and reason and the possible manifestations of reason, right? Which could also be seen in the tensions between a more continental tradition and the English tradition of being more skeptical and suspicious about the universal proposals, because when confronted with reality, it's like, well, there's something, we cannot be as optimistic as you plan to, right? So what you said, I think, well, one of the things that you said, and you said many important things, is that sometimes when we are reading and working with philosophers, sometimes we forget that our perception of the world is very different from Kant's perception of the world, exactly because of that point of sharing. Kant could look at the Renaissance and all the scientific revolutions and feel close to it. There is a shareness of an horizon of meaning and experiences that were made in the same terms. And of course, this relates to growth. While today, and I guess that's one of the reasons, it's certainly one of the reasons that could explain the levels of anxiety in general in humans, individual persons, but also as society as a whole, which is, and I think even more than when Hannah Arendt wrote The Human Condition, that said, well, look, we are going to the moon, we are looking at the space and so on. And now we gave a step further, and we are actually, we actually have this great man in history like Elon Musk, who claims that we should make all the efforts to become the first species which is interplanetary and, you know, occupy and colonize the universe. And that, of course, if you put this in perspective with also the several narratives that have been set in motion for the past 20, 30 years of on the one hand, of allowing us to have some hope in democracy and its unfoldings in the sense of prosperity and peace and growth and happiness. And on the other hand, the shock that because of the growth, it became impossible to realize. And we had this orchestration of global narratives, not only in economical and financial terms, but also the question of the environment, which became a little bit apocalyptic. And it contributes to the general anxiety of trading off the possibility of imagining oneself in the future, even in a short period of time, for the present. And that is exactly why this incapacity, this difficulty of projecting oneself in time, allied to concrete proposals, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg, metaverse. Let's you know, if you think the proposal of metaverse and all these impulsive new realm of business and profits and technology that has to do with gaming, virtual gaming, and these parallel virtual worlds that are and will certainly be built in a very sharp and rapid pace. And you look at this, and your sense of self becomes fragmented, right? There's like, oh, we need and you were talking, and I was, because I'm a very strong advocate of individual freedom, as you know, it's I cannot simply quit. But I was asking myself while you were talking, perhaps this generation, it's simply not important for them. Freedom, it doesn't matter. It's like what for us and for some people, it's still the defining trait of humanity. It simply doesn't matter because we are discussing. We are already in a level of discussing and actually acting on it with the artificial intelligence and all the transhumanist and posthumanist. We don't even know what will become of us as a species in one generation, 2 generations. So it's not really a question. Well, actually, I have a punctual question for you, but it's more a reflection on what you just said. That there is this. It seems from the proposals there are on the table, none of them actually actually proposes to rescue a public use of freedom. That's the first. There's no proposal for a public use of freedom. On the contrary, because communication and expression is now happening in private spaces, which creates certain techniques of constitution of subjectivity in the sense of even self-censorship, right? So there's no public use of reason. There's a set of conditions that push us forward to abdicate of freedom, even freedom of movement. And there's already several proposals in place of how to deal with the world, with a global governance. And as you said, the Silicon Valley, the experiment, well, we cannot get rid of this immediately, but let's just find another way of doing what needs to be done, because actually democracy and all this discussion of individual and human rights is just a great obstacle, which is exactly the point of Schwab in the Great Reset. It's like, you cannot have both. You cannot have a global order that is efficient, that has nothing to do with our collective imaginary for the past 400 years. But the thing is, why should we accept? Because then we would be resigning, in my perspective, of exactly the only thing that differs us from all other species is the idea of freedom, in a very Kantian sense, but also in a Hobbesian sense, in a sense of freedom of movement, of not having obstacles. So what do you think about this, the possibilities of individual freedom as expression of reason, but not as reasonableness? And that would be perhaps a last comment. You also mentioned Carl Schmitt and the thing of the sovereign is the one that has the power to do the exception. And I think he was very acute and precise in his critique of liberalism, that's saying there's a problem here, and once you with time you become incapable of actually making a public use of reason, because you just want to live. You want to live comfortably. You want to, all this logic, even in the critical theory tradition with Habermas, the consensus and the communicative action, and we are equals, and we look at the world and we see nothing that worked. Actually, it's a very bad description for the conditions that we have today. So my question would be, how do you imagine, because it's a matter of political imagination, how do you imagine this call for contesting or resisting to authority and preserving individual freedom in the present and in the future, without necessarily being caught in any of the established readings of the Enlightenment, the positive or the Dark Enlightenment.
Thank you. I think your question and Vanderson's, right, are very interesting. I will start by making a distinction between what is reason and reasonableness, right? And that's a key point, right? The reasonableness is how you weight choices with equal weight, right? And Locke talks about this in his two essays, the reasonableness of Christianity and on toleration. And Thiel actually is brilliant when he talks about the reasonableness of Christianity, because it's funny when you read Locke's works, because you can imagine like Woody Allen like writing the book and talking the book about reasonableness of Christianity, because like you can imagine Locke shrugging, like saying like, well, you know, like Christianity is reasonable because, you know, like before religions were all about this like secret like knowledge that you had to know in order for you to meet like your gods, right? But like what God, like in Christianity, is about this God that like loves everyone, like that is not very secret at all. Like he just lowers the bar of understanding, and he wants just like, and he's like, you know what, like the people that like Jesus tried to convert in the beginning were really stupid. Like it was not like, you really were not, like they were not really smart, and they knew they were stupid, and they understood this, and some of them didn't even understand it, but they followed it. And the thing is that, and then he talks about like, isn't Christianity great? Like it's like you, like everyone can understand it, and you can see like Locke shrugging, right? Like, and the thing about, but like the whole point of the book is about Locke being like, Locke telling you like, really, like you can be a Christian, but you can be like, like I'm a Christian. Like it's you don't need to be like a zealot. Like, and then he talks about on toleration, like a guy that is like, I am a Christian and I want everyone to be a Christian. Like Locke is like, no, don't be like that. Why should you? Like you should like let everyone do whatever they want, right? And that's fine. Like God doesn't get angry because of that. And the things that and that sort of reasonableness is that sort of indifference at the margin. And in order for you to be like to use reason, you need to be indifferent at the margin, because the whole point of scientific understanding, like for instance, right, is that you're able to like put a hypothesis out, right, and really don't attach any emotion to it and be able to disprove it dispassionately. Like, okay, like I have a control group, like experimental group, and then I see whether there's a difference, and I won't get angry if there is a difference between of them, like, because I want to disprove it, right? And I really cannot be I need to be indifferent to both in order for scientific understanding to come out of that, right? But the thing is that Thiel is very poignant to that in that point, because it says, you know what, people really cannot be like that. Like people are passionate about these things, and your point about like currently how we like the sense of self, how is it being disjointed, and how it's fragmented, and that is causing some interesting consequences to today's in this day and age. And one of the big consequences is that people are feeling lonely, right? That sort of loneliness, right? And there is the Octavio Paz, I teach in my political science class. he has a beautiful book called Labyrinth of Solitude, and he talks about the Pachuco, right? The Pachuco is the 50 years ago, 60 years ago. The Pachuco was the guy in Mexico, the Mexican that lives in LA, that is neither Mexican nor American. So the Pachuco is this guy that ties the clothes here, and he's like the sort of the gangster, like in that day and age. But he was neither Mexican nor American, and he said that it was a reactive political construct that was lonely, that didn't have any historical attachment, because he was neither from the U.S. or from Mexico. And he said that like in Latin America, like we are feeling that sort of historical loneliness because we are not, and this was 60 years ago. Like he says, like we really cannot attach ourselves to a historical tradition because we come from, in terms of like Spanish-speaking countries, we really cannot. We are like tied to like this flux of influences, and we're like orphans. Like that was his view. But in today's days, in this day and age, you could argue that that applies, but not to the guy at the Pachuco, but applies to the avatar that is in the metaverse, right? Because when you go into the metaverse, like, and let's make like some of you played Second Life, like nobody cares about Second Life anymore. But the whole thing about Second Life was there were points of view about Second Life that were very similar to Octavio Paz. There was a guy called Edward Castronova that wrote about like how if this sort of metaverse thing, this was 20 years ago, like this sort of metaverse thing happens, how people are gonna just go into the virtual worlds and they're just gonna leave the real world behind, right? And they're gonna leave the real world behind, and they're gonna try to construct a new identity in this virtual world. But the thing is that the same thing that happens to Octavio Paz, the Pachuco, is gonna happen to the avatar. The avatar is not tied to a personal history, right? Or like, and it's going to be, and that as a lonely historical construct, right? You're going to have a hard time because it's going to have, and this is something, it's a provocation, but and I'll end with two messages. Like the first one, if the avatar is in this metaverse, his mobilization and his sense of self, is it free and public? No, it's in the metaverse, right? It's in a Meta or Facebook owned domain, monetized. He can move around. He has the appearance of freedom, of mobilization. He can talk to people, but everything that he does is recorded. He does it in a private setting. He cannot interact with non-metaverse avatars. He cannot, while he's using the thing, he cannot interact with other groups without any sort of without the filter that is provided by the metaverse. Compare that to a assembly, right? If you go out into the street, right? If you go into a street to a manifestation and you have like a megaphone and you're talking to people, right? You are literally like in the corner talking to people without any sort of mediation, right? There is no self-censorship. Like if you need to talk about like, I will not vaccinate. Like if you say that in the metaverse, most likely you're gonna get eliminated. Or I don't know what's gonna happen. Like that's you can say it. You can say it in the street. You can agree or disagree with it, but the whole point is that people are making up their minds as they are hearing you, and they're hearing you without no mediation, right? You don't have that in the metaverse. So when I say that, and that was a brilliant example, Marta. Like, thank you. Like, if you're using technological means to achieve what seems to be the free and public use of reason, but that hijack emotion, that is pretty much what is the Dark Enlightenment. And that's the view that is behind the metaverse. Just one last point on the metaverse. The metaverse, when you read the origin of the metaverse, and it's in a novel called A Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. The metaverse was something that it was a dystopia. Like in the novel, you read about how Hero, the protagonist, like the world sucks in the future, and the metaverse is just this thing that happens in a dystopic world. But the funny thing about the Dark Enlightenment is that you're seeing like this sort of like dystopic views of the world being harnessed for good and being turned into good things. That's one. And I'll end with another point of view. Freedom. Like if we are consequentialists, like we need to be, why do we need freedom? Right? Why is freedom a thing? Why is it important? Like if you're a consequentialist, is that it must have some sort of importance benefit for people to be free, right? But the thing is that I think that people are, and that's something that I use, and I think the liberals, I think, have a good point on that. And even like I would say even Marxists, like God bless them, like if you are free, you can flourish, right? Like that's if you are free, you can become what you are. Like if you have no constraints, you can push those constraints, right? Mm-hmm. And you can grow, and the sky's the limit. That's the reason why David Deutsch called this book The Beginning of Infinity, right? Because there is no constraint. But the thing is, if you're living in the metaverse will constrain you. You will flourish until the constraint awarded by the metaverse. And the metaverse is not going to do anything that will harm the metaverse. So you're going to be constrained to the metaverse welfare, right? Or the people that own the metaverse. And you could argue, well, that happens with the states. The states have constraints in terms of their charters and all that, right? But the things that the charters are publicly framed. Like you choose the charters, you fight for the charters. Would you be able to have a revolution in the metaverse? Would you be able to elect people in the metaverse? Like the metaverse is going to be, I don't think you're going to be able to do it like a metaverse revolution because you're going to be constrained by the metaverse. So that's if you are the consequentialist view is like you are free because you can flourish and you can push the boundaries. But if those boundaries are hardened and put over you and there is no escape, you won't be able to resist authority, which was the whole point of the Enlightenment Project.
Exactly. Wonderful. Thank you, Eloy. Ricardo.
Well, I'd like to say I love the lecture. I am very, very close to the critical theory, Bourdieu's, Lacey, and other people who has a critical point of view of technology, of society. And what you say about the Dark Enlightenment reminds me a test that I read today about psychology. How psychology became ally to the status quo. This test is from Hilton Japiaçu, Epistemological Questions, is a Brazilian philosopher, and he's talking about psychology, and he says, psychology's failure is the word is a liberating word. It betrays herself when it prostitutes itself with the imperatives of society and institutions, which give it prestige and love it, insofar as it lends itself to an ever-increasing job of adapted and integrate man into society. So this psychology today, the psychology today is a psychology you have to accept the things how they are. So we don't have to try to change. We don't have to seek the freedom. Things are good. You have to accept. You go to the psychologist. You go to the or to the doctor. They gives you the medication just to you adapt to accept the reality, not to search the freedom, not to work with your potentials. You accept, oh, politicians are all equal, we don't have to do nothing. I don't know why I should vote because it's not changing anything. Democracy is a shit, is a bad thing. I can do anything. There is a feeling of apathy, inertia. And for other hand, I think the Dark Enlightenment has a root in this psychology of the accept the status quo, because if this is the best, if this is we cannot change, there's nothing up ahead, so let's back to the past, because in the past things are much better, things are much there. There are values, there are I don't know, there are order, there are respect, there are family. So let's back, because if we cannot change this reality, we should back, because back is better. It's like the myths of the Greek and Roman society, the Gold Age. The Gold Age is the best age, and through the times we get corrupted, the societies turn bad, and we try always to back to the past. The Saturnali was a fair that they want to return to the past, return to the gold age, the age of Saturn, the god of the perfection, the god of time, and a good time that we lost. So I think this feeling of we cannot change, and this psychology of the accept the things how they are, um, this is there's a great there's a great impact in the people, and some people don't want to change, and then others want to back. They don't want to exercise the freedom, the power to change, the humanity. I think we lost the humanity. We lost the human being, the subject, in order to accept just the object. I think the lights became so oppressive. They take off the man, take off the subject, is the who is the source of transformation, and we live in the world. We don't think we can change things. We don't accept or try to back to the past.
Can I talk?
Anderson, pode falar.
Well, Ricardo, thank you for the question. It brought me a thought. You say that democracy is a shit, but we don't have any modern system of politics, a political modern system better than democracy until now. So we must have to accept the better system that we have until now. And you said that in antiquity, things were better, but I disagree with you. In the antiquity were marked by wars, uh, slavery, despotism. I think the world is progression in direction of a free world where everyone is free, where everyone is equal. Well, that's just what I like to say.
Thank you, Vanderson and Ricardo. Eloy.
I think I would like to comment on that because we need to be very careful about trying to superimpose our like you said, Marta, like our views of the world today in terms of the past. The thing is that the past, you need, in order for us to assess in order to assess the past, we need to assess it in terms of we cannot either like I'll put an example. If you read old Pinker's books about the Enlightenment, Pinker says that the world is so much better today than it was not even like 100 years ago, like 30 years ago. Like it was like but
he's an optimist. It's a radical,
and that's fine. But the thing is that the problem with that point of view is that there's a pick and choose element to it. If you ask a historian of the Middle Ages, you tell them that it was the Dark Ages, he will punch you in the face, like because and that's because like modern medieval studies very much say that the medieval ages were actually a lot better than the Renaissance. And even Jacob Burckhardt, like in his book about the Renaissance of Italy, and I think it was in 1850 something, he used to say like, hey, you know what, the Renaissance, it was great for painters and for like scientists and like writers, but it was like awful for everyone else. And the thing is that, and even you go back in time, you see that there were times in during the Roman Empire that during the during the High Antoninus, like during the Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus, Marcus Aurelius, like the 100 and something years of those guys were emperors. Like it was like, oh, the golden age of Rome. Like that wasn't that golden. Like it was an awful time to be alive. There was there was the bubonic plague or like typhoid and everyone dying, and it was all a mess. But the thing is that like many people in this day and age, they say, oh, and look at the past and how great it was, and we need to be careful about that. And also like during the times at the same time, there is a big interest in the people that actually do like this view of Silicon Valley of founders and all that, to look a lot to antiquity. And I'm a big believer in antiquity. Like I had, by fortune, I was well read in the classics, and I think a humanities education and classical education is great. Like read like all the classics if you're able to learn Latin, like all those crazy things. But be careful, because the reasons why people want to like go back to classics is because there is a big view in the Dark Enlightenment that want to make feudalism great again. Like, and the thing is that it's a little bit crazy when you think about it. And I'll do a provocation, right? The whole point of feudalism, like when you start about the origin, and this is something that I'm starting to research, but I don't have a big definite research, so I'll be preliminary about this. When the Roman Empire fell, right, and the feudal ages started, right, it was very much like what's happened, like difference aside, like from technology and all that, it was very much what's happening today. You had a lot of people, like a lot of entrepreneurs, we call them like barbarian on horseback, or so, like they were getting a lot of land, right? They were getting, and they were starting to, there was a lot of innovation in creating this like kingdoms, which became the Franks, the Vandals, the Goths, and which later became the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither Holy Roman or an empire. That was like a big quip with medievalists, and they started like enclosing these principalities around in the post-Roman Empire. And these was people, they were like entrepreneurs, they were political entrepreneurs that got a lot, that were able to fight better than their cohorts, and they were able to get this land and become the prince of that land, right? And they were able to gain title to that land because they were able to defend it successfully for many years, in order for them to acquire the titles of baron, which was pretty much the guy. The baron pretty much means man of the land, or the dux, which means the leader, like in land of the land, right? And that's how they got it. And the thing is that many people today, like many entrepreneurs, and I'll put the most ridiculous example possible. Mayweather, the boxer, right? Mayweather said in one of his fights, like I think it was the Jake Paul fight. I don't know if you guys watch boxing. Like Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers of all time, fought this YouTuber, like this dude like named Jake Paul, right? And he won like $50 million for a really bad like boxing fight. But he said something that gives you it's not something very different than Charles Martel would have said, like Charlemagne's father would have said 1,500 years ago. He said that he wanted that fight because he wants to create intergenerational wealth for his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Mm-hmm. So what he's doing really much is getting a lot of capital, and by some means closing it in, right? Yes. By monopoly, by some trusts. Remember, like many people, like many companies in Silicon Valley, in order for you to compete against like Google, like we're talking through Google. Hi Google, don't censor me. Or like to compete with Facebook or compete with some other company. Like it's really difficult because these guys are established players and they have a monopoly, very much like the Vandals used to, like the Vandals of the Franks had a monopoly over the use of force in their land. These guys have a monopoly over the external economies across of network effects of their products. So it's very hard to me, Eloy, to create Eloy Google and compete with Google because Google has 95% of market share. Yeah. And even though I have a great idea, like it's almost a monopoly. Like it talks to itself, it works within itself. And the thing is that sort of dynamics in terms of wealth is what's happening today. Like this sort of dynamics, if it doesn't change, it will lead to some sort of neo-feudal order when people that own these assets are able to gain title through time. So
it's a techno-feudalism.
There's people writing about this. Like the thing is that there's people writing about this. Like it's funny that one of the guys that basically one of the greatest minds one of the most brilliant thinkers in terms of philosophy and economics, his name is Tyler Cowen, and he's very much into the techno crowd, but he's brilliant. Like there's no way about it. He talks about the Great Stagnation and the complacent class, and he talks about like three classes of that actually map very closely to what there is a book by Joel Kotkin called The New Feudal Order, about pretty much identifying the three states that were present in revolutionary France in today. And he talks about the new oligarchy, which is the first state, which are all these very famous companies that basically are companies that work within monopoly sectors or companies that actually have a lot of network effects that make them almost unchallengeable. You have the new clerisy, which is the second state, which was like the clergy people, like in France, which is now like the group of the intellectuals, right? The people in NGOs, universities, in bureaucracies, in government, international organizations, and all that basically are like very much the second state in France. And you have the third state, which was the small business owners and the bourgeoisie, which in France then and even today are always like it's very hard for them to actually get secure footing in economics, because they were concentrated in cities. They didn't have access to a lot of capital. And then you have the rest of us, which are like the serfs. But the thing is that you can see that there is like people are talking about these things, because the same dynamics are happening. Like right now we're seeing, and I'll end here, these ideas of like this newfound wealth, which is now measured in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of billions of dollars, is people that are wealthy. They are not trying to get more money. They're getting more money, but what they want to secure is title. They want to secure that the money that they have will be able to be passed, not necessarily to their sons, because many people have done the giving pledge, and they were basically what they want, but they wanted to be able to have some sort of trust that they will be able to give their money in order for their legacy to live on. Not to mention the fact that many of these people pretty much want to live forever. Like they want to, like they're investing in these medical technologies for them to live like 400 years old. So that's something that is very present, and it's not. It may seem a little crazy, but it's right now we're seeing the same process that happened when the Roman Empire fell and the new feudal age began. So we need to understand that process a little bit better.
Wonderful. Vanderson? Vanderson? Levantou a mãozinha?
Oh, sorry. I just like to say that Bill Gates made some donation for the poor in the world without being compelled by any state. He made it by virtue, by ethics, because he knows that he has too much, and there are many people that have nothing.
I didn't understand very well. Like to say that, like what is the role of virtue in this day and age, when there's the people that actually have a lot and people that don't have anything. Is that correct?
I meant that it wasn't necessary that a state tax Bill Gates to offer services of health, food to the poor in the world. Do you understand now?
Yeah. Like it's a good point, and that's actually been debated today in around the world, right? How to do you have inequality has increased to points, and actually there is and it's controversial though, because the data on inequality, you're gonna use like income inequality, or you're gonna have wealth inequality. In terms of income inequality is lower now, but wealth inequality has exploded, right? Because you have people that have levels of wealth. You have a lot of people that have levels of wealth combined that are like never seen in human history, right? And you could argue, in order for you to make the argument whether you should tax them or not, you should first understand. We should, I think, better understand where does their wealth come from? From income or their wealth? The issue with that is you can tax their income, right? It's easier to tax their income because something that you can get like on a regular basis. If you tax their wealth, how do you tax their wealth? And that's something that the United States is trying to do. But it's not as easy as it sounds. Because, for instance, and because I follow these things on because of other things, like of other things. Elon Musk, 2 weeks ago, what's a week ago? A week ago, he did a Twitter like poll saying that, do you guys, everyone, like to his millions of followers, like, should I sell my Tesla stock, right? And everyone said, like, yes, you should, right? But the thing is that Elon Musk, like most of his wealth as the wealthiest person in the planet nowadays, is because he has and I don't want to get economic, like boring with you guys, but this is something that it's the devil's in the details. He has a lot of money his wealth is tied to stock in Tesla that he hasn't sold. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have that money in his pocket, like he had it in his bank account. That money is in Tesla stock, which is in the company, right? That he owns, but he hasn't liquidated. So if you tax his wealth, you will be taxing Tesla, right? And if you tax Tesla, then Tesla is not going to be producing the cars that produce the jobs for people, like and the income. Tesla is not a very profitable company. That's the thing. Like if you tax Tesla, like if you tax Elon Musk on realized stock on a company that has much of its wealth in paper, then you are doing a disservice to the people that actually work in Tesla, and then you're going to have a lot of layoffs in Tesla, right? Because Elon Musk doesn't have income. Like he has a lot of debt. Like he's wealthy because he has, and that happens to many rich people. I know Latin America actually has different problems because many people in Latin America sadly get wealthy because of non-legal means. But the thing is that in terms of Elon Musk, he pretty much borrows, like he goes to the bank and he borrows money against his stock, right? So he has a debt, like he needs to pay debt. He's paying debt based on his stock. So pretty much you tax him, you cannot tax him of the money that he gets from the loan, right? So you need to tax him because of the money that of his income, which is non-existent. He doesn't get it. He earns like, I don't think it's like $100,000 a year from Tesla. Like so how do you do that? And the things that the United States have been racking their brains, like how do we tax people in ways that are efficient? And then we come full circle to the full feudalism thing. The problem with feudal lords, right, in the low Middle Ages and high Middle Ages, how could you tax them? That was the problem. The king really had a hard time taxing feudal lords because they had the same go-arounds that today rich people have. Like the feudal lord will be like, the king will say, okay, I need to tax you, feudal lord. And then if you learn, but hey, I only have land, like, and you're not gonna take the land that my family gave me because that's illegal. And it's like, okay, well then give me like food, right? And then the guy would say, okay, he would say to a tenant farmer, like a guy to basically work to produce the food that the king wanted, and he would tax the tenant farmer, but he was not being taxed. The feudal lord was not being taxed. Like the whole point of like the feudal ages was that the feudal lord will dilute responsibility among his serfs and the serfs would give them the money in order for the money to be given to the king. The same thing actually, if you think about it, the same thing actually happens nowadays with capital that is being taxed by governments with very rich people. So and I really don't have the answer. Like, of course, I would like for everyone to give their fair share, but the problem is the mechanisms in order for you to tax wealth and income haven't progressed a lot over the past 1,500 years. Like, it's stupid if you really say it like that, but we're reaching like a certain, like, it's the dynamics, and this is the first time I actually think about it. Like, the dynamics are very similar in terms of the wealth structure. Like, fine, like one thing was tied to land and the other one's tied to capital, but in both cases you were taxing. It was very hard to tax unrealized benefits, right? And the same thing's happening today.
Yes, and that expectation, that wish of Biden's government to be able to tax on unrealized gains, which is also absurd, and
it's difficult. Well, it's very hard. Like, it's a very important issue.
But it would be catastrophic, because that would actually push certainly the still almost non-existing middle class. I don't know where to, because they would be probably forced. Nobody would have actually the money to pay taxes on unrealized gains. If you see that the real estate has increased value in the past year, 25, imagine that it's 25, 30%, and the government says, well, now you need to pay more. But of course, the person asks for a loan to the bank, and she cannot afford, she doesn't have the money on the side to cover a higher evaluation of the property. So what then? Right? And of course, it's always the middle class who suffers, because those who have liquidity or they have the means, they can exactly do what Elon Musk did. Well, let's see. It's great. I'm going to sell a percentage of my shares, and I'll have liquidity. So, and also because the stocks were very high in value, and probably is unsustainable for, everybody's talking that a crash will come. It's only a matter of time. So let's just take the profit out, and I will be in a better place when things come down again, right? But for a regular human being that lives on income and that has that not as a means to reproduce wealth, but actually the debt is a trap for every the debt is always a trap for the middle class, because the middle class it's a form of slavery. Actually, you become slave. you became slave in order to pay the debt, and you will never get rid of it, or it will take 10, 20, 30 years to get rid of something so it's a way of empowering yourself through debt for the middle classes, but not for those who have wealth and use that to create and to expand more wealth. And that is one of the things that I think most people that do not study or deal in daily life with economics, it's more difficult to understand the role of the relationship between debt and creation of wealth or means of impoverishment.
Agree. I totally agree.
Vanderson.
when I talked about Bill Gates doing charity, I was attending to the Kantian distinction between ethical duties and legal duties. Do you speak Portuguese, Professor?
Oh no, I don't want to try my Portuguese with Portuñol.
Okay.
But I can understand you. Like don't you're doing perfect.
All right. Then it would be a matter of ethics, make charity or benevolence to others, a part of the individual. So an individual helping others, helping the poor, a rich individual helping the poor, is a matter of ethics, not a matter of the right.
It would be some kind of moral obligation.
Yes, it's a moral obligation.
For those who...
But wait, please. It's just a matter. It's not a matter of right, in the sense that the individual can be compelled, physically constrained, to make charges to the poor.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and that's a great point, because the thing is that this thing has happened before. Like during I don't know if you if you guys have read I think it's a book that everyone needs to read at least once. Is the Great Transformation by Karl Polanyi, and he talks about and it's the same thing that Marx talks about. Like Marx talks about the Enclosure Movement in Capital One in the last chapters. And Polanyi talks about the enclosures too. And he talks about how when they privatized lands in Britain in the late 1600s, and like they were privatizing the commons, like the common lands that serfs used to have in order for the grazing lands for the cattle. There was a big problem, because when you privatize agriculture in Britain, you were starting the push of the proletariat from the agricultural lands into the cities, right? And there was a lot of vagrants, because like as you privatize and scaled up production of cattle, there was a lot of redundant labor, right? And those things actually you talk in the last chapters of Capital. I think there was nobody is as eloquent as Polanyi or Marx in describing the process. And the thing is, the British authorities had a big trouble, because like they had a lot of people that were like needing like assistance, and they came to the realization, what you were saying, I think Vanderson, right? That you really couldn't depend on the parish to give money voluntarily to provide for the people. That you really had to like tax and have some sort of and that's what a tax, and what basically became the first essay of a universal basic income through the Spinham-Land laws. And the thing is that these ideas are floating around. The whole point of like, if you ask people, especially in the tech sector, whether they approve a universal basic income, they will say yes, right? But the thing is that you need to be very wary about the universal basic income, because universal basic income is telling you, you know what, I'm going to give alms to some sort of this basic subsidy for you to live on, right? And this basic subsidy is going to be like a catch-all. You're not going to get anything else. And that basic subsidy is because you really cannot find work anywhere. There is no work for you. And the things that I tend to subscribe to like the Hannah Arendt point of view, that actually work, like you find meaning in work. Like you do things, like if you're telling people that you're gonna receive a subsidy, because one thing is to receive a subsidy, if you're taxing for government services, right? If you're taxing, it's a different dynamic. Think about it. If I tax you, and you as a rich person, in order for me to provide for basic government services like healthcare or work-related stuff or pensions, right? If you are working, right, I have to guarantee, I need to tax you in order for you to in order to guarantee a basic pension, right? The problem is but that basically stems from the assumption that you were working. But if I give you a universal basic income because you are pretty much unemployable, and there is no, like, everything else in like work related, you really cannot compete against a machine or an avatar or whatever, right? The dynamic changes. Like, it's not the same thing. It's not that I'm taxing you because in order for the government to fill up a differential of services or money that you need in order to have a decent living. No, like a universal basic income is pretty much saying, you know what, you will not find work, you are redundant labor, and you are going to have something in order for you not to live under a bridge. But it's not that you're going to have a meaningful life through work. And the thing is that the British tried doing that, but that was awful, because the people, they were given alms, and they were given like the subsidy. But the thing is that then the problem started that these people pretty much were redundant in their regions. So and it made the problem a lot worse. And eventually, what this gave rise was the rise of the Labour Party in Britain, that pretty much wanted to push for social policies, but through labor and work-related policies, not through giving alms or subsidies. And the thing is that there's this sort of policies, like they are different. It's not, they sound the same, but they stem from different conceptions of what Hannah Arendt thought, like the vita activa, right? The of active living. Like, it's not that you were passive and you pretty much like to sit down and waiting for the government to give you things. And on here, currently there is a big movement for like constituencies to ask for government to give them free stuff, right? And it's not the same from asking for union rights, asking for better health care through, like, this is different. Like, it's giving, like, give me a subsidy, and no strings attached. And that is a different dynamic. And again, and because one dynamic depends on you being an active, if you're a union member, or you have a health care, or you have a pension related benefits, that depends on you being a productive member of society. You're contributing to the creation of value through a collective effort through society. But if you're asking for your subsidies in order for you to, because you really cannot find employment because your skills doesn't insert you in a meaningful conversation and the skill set of productive life in society, then that stuff stems from a view of the Dark Enlightenment. If you're in the metaverse, right? No, I'm sorry, I extended a little myself. But if you're in the metaverse, what the metaverse wants is you pretty much to take breaks for like eating, going to the bathroom, and doing and sleeping. And you pretty much can have rent and food, right? In order for you to be a productive member of the metaverse. But again, being a productive member of the metaverse is a productive member of society.
Well, teacher, I just want to ask if the act in the state taxing some people to provide others with some goods like healthcare, education, such acts are causing injustice to the person that is taxed. The state wouldn't have been unjust when he taxed some people to provide service to other people. That was only what I meant.
Okay. I did subscribe to the view that the taxes are again a tax on the producer in order for to provide financing for services for the entrepreneur in order to provide services for the poor, or it's not for the poor, Vanderson, it's for the worker, right? Wow. That's the difference, right? If I as a company, as IBM, right? Let's put it in concrete. Like I'm an old company, like IBM. I'm IBM. I produce computers, like a long time ago, right? And IBM gets taxed. I am the president of IBM. I get taxed, and those taxes actually go to pensions and healthcare. But the people that actually get those pensions and healthcare are people that are inserted in the relationship within the company. So are people that are workers for my company. And then let's expand the set. Let's not talk about IBM, but all the companies of the country and all the workers of the company of the country. So all the companies in the country get taxed in order to finance healthcare and pensions for the workers of that country. But the precondition is that workers need to work for the company. That sort of view, when the big welfare states were created, that was the underlying idea behind taxes and benefits, right? Workers, like companies, would be taxed to finance the benefits of workers, right? And that'll be a win-win scenario, because basically you say, you know what, you as a company can pay less than you should pay, because I as a government, I'm gonna worry about designing the pension system. I'm gonna be efficient in making a pension system that works at scale, that is able to work, that is big enough, that is able to have a single payer, is able to be cheap in order to be managed, because it's going to be big. And I will handle all those things in terms of healthcare, and I'll handle all those things in terms of pensions. So, that is very different when you say, I'm going to tax companies, right, in order to guarantee a basic income to everyone, especially the poor, right? Because then the poor are not inserted in the productive life of society. And the thing is that goes against the view of how you frame a democratic state in terms of this benefit. That's the reason why, and I'll end up here, but this is a very controversial issue. And it'll be great to talk about this like some other time, but because I used to study this like a long time ago. The thing about the controversy behind this is that many people in conservative countries, they want to dismantle this sort of welfare states, right? Because people are not because workers are growing scarce. There are not a lot of people that actually work, that have meaningful employment. And the reason why they want to dismantle these welfare states, because if you have not a lot of workers at the bottom, right, they really cannot sustain the cost structure of the welfare and pensions. And many countries around the world are having the same problems, right? Because the whole industrial society that was based out of that system is crumbling down. And the thing is that this sort of progress towards virtual reality and towards virtuality, like people actually work in service sectors, people can actually they don't work in companies, they work on their cell, they are working on their own. Like the ILO, the International Labor Organization, talks about informality, like the precariat. The precariat doesn't pay taxes in order to keep those sort of programs running. So what governments are like, what these companies, big companies, what they want is saying, you know what, and this is something that is happening nowadays. And the OECD talked about this. I am going to, like, companies are saying, you know what, I'm gonna pay you a minimum tax, right? 10% of my global income. But you are going to, with that tax, not finance pensions or like other stuff, right? I want that money to go directly to universal basic income in order to pretty much get people that are unemployable to be able to insert themselves into the metaverse. But no, like, it's not like to insert themselves into like to be able to live their lives like under minimum standard. But it's not that the tax is like theft or anything. Like, this was a careful, calibrated plan that depended on a model of development that is right now not and it's not, like, given the current economy and current, like, the post-pandemic and technology and current technologies, like, I don't find it sustainable.
Yeah,
Well, pode falar, professora.
I was just, I'll just make a comment exactly with this injection of billions and billions of Biden's government. Well, it started with Trump, but I remember that early in the year when there was this distribution of checks to all Americans due to the pandemic, and then there was a great expectation that, well, we're going to recover the economy, and there's like 1 million or more than 1 million job openings, and the first result was they couldn't fill even half of it because people don't want to work anymore. They don't want to go back to their works, to their jobs, because simply it doesn't pay off, right? And if we think about this, there's no incentives to have a job. There's no incentives to have a job. The inflation is going through the roof. So I actually think that this thing of the metaverse and the virtual taking over, it's quite strategic because it will be the place. Well, of course, you will have the brains behind it, but for those who will survive through it, it's like a secure space to avoid revolutions and possible rebellions, and to keep the new lumpen proletariat quiet, right? So it's like, let them be here. We will give them something, and they will. It's almost like a drug. Like, let's just give them some drug, so they will be quiet. So we solve the issue of social instability and social disruption with the manifestations and the claims for this and that and that. And of course, regarding, because I agree with you, it's totally unsustainable, the model as it is. It's impossible. It's impossible. And if you start increasing taxes in order to maintain this in this old-fashioned model, that subsidies and universal basic income, which you will have, ultimately you will shoot the incentives for production as well. So it is a big problem, because it raises questions of justice, of legitimacy. Well, democratic legitimacy goes through the window also. It's unsustainable. But I think ultimately we will be forced to rethink the limits and the role of the states, of the nation states, in terms of taxes, coercion, money, the monopoly of money, which is clearly not doing good. I mean, I don't know who's making all these calls that affect billions of people in the world, but they don't seem very smart. I mean, it's not, actually, they are very smart because it has nothing, or not. Well, it depends on the person that will be talking. But it has clearly no compromise with any of our still old-fashioned ideals of respect for citizens and human beings as such, because they really don't care, right? They don't care. They're in this other class, the elite class, and the rest of humans, the majority of humans, are actually disposable. They are treated as disposable. They are used as means for a project of power. They reduced nation states as means for something else. And I think we'll probably have a short glimpse, like a short opportunity to really reimagine the role and the tasks that we want the state to assume, to take over, and perhaps some other responsibilities that it's time to rethink the social pact, but not as this elite wants, not in the sense of a global governance, but in the sense of thinking of the separation of powers and interference. And the question of money, I think it's crucial, right? The question of who's printing all this money and throwing it into the world. And this eventually, I mean, we will pay for it. We will pay for it. And
actually, I'll have to chat with you. I'll text you next week about that point precisely, because there is a Latin American Council social sciences grant on that point of view. So I'm going to ask you about if you're interested too. I need to be going soon, but I just want to end with a closing point, right? And I think what Marta said is very important in terms of like the next, like, people write in political philosophy. Like I'm a newcomer to this sort of thing. I did write a few things when I was in the new school. But I'm working on stuff like in mathematical moral philosophy. Right? I'm writing an article on that. And I'm very interested in trying to work on this issue, because one of the things that I want you and your students to know, and Marta, like you're not very knowledgeable about this too, is that ideas matter. And the thing is that ideas matter. Like when we talk about philosophy, like everyone's like, oh, it's like talking about philosophy is like boring, but like what, like who cares what Kant said, or what about Locke, or that sucks. Like no, it's not. Like these things actually have consequences. Like this whole the whole practical project of the Enlightenment, right? Like it came at a point that you need to take it seriously, because the essay Kant wrote is a stupid 3-page essay, right? But it says a lot of things that until then they were considered something that was assumed. But there's something about you writing something and other people seeing it, and it's like, wow, that's actually true. Like I never thought about it. And there's a lot of things happening in the world nowadays about things that are very prescient in terms of like there is a lot of developments in terms about technological developments. People are going to the moon, like big companies making like really really huge innovations that are going to change the way that our world is going to look like in 10 years. And that's the reason why I started talking about discount rates, because that's something that we don't talk about in philosophy a lot. I think the only person that talks about in philosophy about this is Agnes Callard. And Agnes Callard is great. Like she's, and I think like, and Robin Hanson too, but Robin Hanson is a little crazy. But the thing is that the point about discount rates is, how do you understand your humanity, right? And let's put the case of Shenzhen. Shenzhen, like 40 years ago, was a sleepy village of 10,000 people, right? Shenzhen now, in 40 years, it has like 50 million people. So imagine if you are a guy you're a 15-year-old kid in Shenzhen 40 years ago. And it was like this village with 10,000 people that was a ramshackle, and you knew everyone, you were on a bike, it was dirt poor, the roads, right? And you know every place you used to swim in the lake, and you used to fish. And 40 years later, it has 50 million people. Like imagine, from 10,000 people to 50, it has skyscrapers, 5 Michelin starred restaurants, like one of the wealthiest people live there. And you saw it in 40 years, all that happening. How do you think like your version of the world changes? Like in terms of the possibilities that you have, the possibilities of you and your kids, you growing up during that time of incredible change, right? Your dreams change, your aspirations change, you yourself change, right? And think about it. When that person is 55 years old, right? And he looks back, does he think that his childhood friends are the same people? Like, when they see each other in the bar, like, do they reminisce about it sounds stupid, but it isn't, because it tells you about how you change your conceptions of human life. Like when what are how do your priorities change in 40 years seeing this city grow from a sleepy fishing village to one of the biggest metropolis of the world, right? And compound that, not extend that to a world where that 55-year-old, his son, right, is going to be living in a city where perhaps 100 million people are going to be living in. When he thinks about his dad, is he going to think like, my dad was the same person as I was, like it was, or am I better because I have more things, right? And that sort of thing changes the way you relate to other people and what is human and what is not human, right? And the thing is that, and one of the things I want to end on this point of view is the reason why this is an important topic is because this technology is changing the way how we relate to each other and how we think of ourselves. And we need to be very careful because technology may change a lot of things, but we need to know, we need to learn, and we need to understand that why technology serves who? Why do we use technology, right? Does it mean that we need to serve technology, or what's the point? Like the whole point about Prometheus, right, was that he and poets like said that he was a friend to man, because he said, like, you know what? Like we were condemned to living in the in dirt poor places, and it gave us fire so we could actually be able to process food and have light at dark, right? But fire served man, right? And the whole point about perhaps Jupiter got angry was because fire served him through thunder, right? It was his weapon, right? But the thing is that when Prometheus gave people fire, he gave people fire because he wanted, like, he knew that fire could be used was for the service of man. Like man was not to be a tool of fire. And the same applies to technology. We need to keep in mind that what makes technology happen is that it's for the service of people, and what remains is that it needs to be able to help in our human flourishing. I'll show.
No, wonderful. We have many other things to discuss. We will do other sessions. So I'm inviting you already. Let's get it on record for next year. Perhaps 2 or 3 during the year. We can think of something, a sequence of exchange of ideas, because there are many real problems that we need to think together about it, right? We need to really reflect in common together and find our way while preserving and enhancing our humanity and not the reverse, right? So thank you so much, Eloy. It was wonderful. Thank you all who are present. Thank you very much. And take care, and we'll talk very soon.
Well, take care, guys. It was great having you. It was great talking to you. And thank you, Marta. Have a nice day.